Hello, hello. It is 5:31, so I'm going to get started. I know how to put the link in the comments, but I think for the first few minutes, I'm going to start on this weaving of webs and pulling of threads with sort of bringing back to sort of how I ended the stream yesterday, talking about this idea of self-deception and how the roles our stories play in our lives we sometimes don't quite understand. And I want to start off that thread with a poem that I wrote yesterday. That this will be the first time reading aloud, so bear with me. And the poem I wrote is called "The Tyranny of the Narrator." Before there were options, there was only the world. Wind crossing water, stones warming beneath the sun, birds who never wondered if they were enough. Then consciousness arrived with its astonishing gift to remember, to imagine, to compare, to narrate. It was a beautiful invention, until we forgot it was an invention. The mind became less like a window and more like a playwright, casting heroes and villains, writing motives for strangers, drafting endings before the first act had even begun. It called this wisdom. Yet wisdom rarely speaks first. It waits until certainty grows tired. We inherit stories, often long before we inherit ourselves. Stories of success, of failure, of tribe, of enemy, of who belongs, and of who matters. Some are handed to us by frightened parents, some by ambitious cultures, some by wounded hearts trying desperately to make pain mean something. The tragedy is not that stories exist. The tragedy is that they become invisible. A fish cannot question water until it has glimpsed the shore. So too, the soul cannot question its narration until reality refuses to cooperate. Failure becomes an unexpected mercy. Grief, an uncompromising teacher. Love, the great editor. Again and again, life crosses out the sentences we insisted upon. The ego persists, reality continues. There is a peculiar freedom in discovering that truth does not require my agreement. The mountain is not offended by my misunderstanding. The river does not change course to preserve my opinions. The stars remain gloriously indifferent to the myths I project onto them. Perhaps this is grace, that reality never grows weary of introducing itself. Simone Weil wrote that attention is the rarest and purest form of generosity. Perhaps because to truly attend is to stop dictating what the world must be long enough to receive what it actually is. The old monks did not flee to the desert to escape the world. They fled the relentless storyteller within themselves. Silence was never the destination. It was the place where narration could no longer drown out being. And slowly, beneath the collapse of every cherished certainty, they discovered something astonishing. The self that required defending was mostly made of sentences. Reality remained, love remained, God remained. But the stories dissolved like mist before morning light. Perhaps salvation is not becoming something new. Perhaps it is awakening from the dream that we were ever the story to begin with. Then every encounter becomes less about proving a narrative and more about meeting reality, undefended, unadorned, and finally face to face. And then the little note I wrote to myself after is, I think what I'm trying to land on is a distinction that has occupied philosophers for centuries. We don't merely have stories, we often inhabit them. The task isn't to stop telling stories altogether, but to become the kind of person who can recognize them as stories, allowing reality rather than the ego or the story itself to have the final word. So as that sinks in, I will hopefully post. And then try to pick. Yeah, so essentially for me, what I was trying to get at yesterday was this idea of stories can be very self-deceptive, or the things that we tell ourselves can often form ourselves and the reality around us in a way that sometimes we don't even realize that we're doing until we encounter reality in this way, the reality that we've created, and we're confused as to what's being presented in front of us. We think, oh, I'm a victim to the circumstance of what I'm seeing. And to a small extent, yes, like you're not really responsible necessarily for the past, but you're responsible for how you attend in the present and into the future. And so I think that the idea of stories can very much muddle what the reality is a lot of the times, at least from a very personal level. And Brett is here. Hello, Brett.
Good morning.
Good morning.
That was really nice.
Awesome. Thank you. Did the message of potential self-deception come across okay?
Oh, yeah. It made me think of years gone by and how I definitely wanted to write a story, and I don't think the story was, I didn't realize how destructive the story was, you know? So it's amazing. I even was thinking about the picture I was painting of myself type thing, you know, and what I wanted to convey to the rest of the world. But really, it probably had more to do with a defense mechanism, you know? So,
I think defenses are like the top stories that we tell ourselves that are so ingrained that we don't even have to tell ourselves it's a story anymore. It's just like a part of our identity almost at that point. Like we don't even have to convince ourselves into it. It's already been inside us, festering almost. Hello, Andrew. Hello, Chad. Welcome.
Hello, hello.
Hello.
Slash good evening from this side of the world.
Andrew, just so you know, like we're starting stories today and I have a deception pathway, but I know that you might have a little bit of, other threads you might want to pull on. So feel free to be creative if you want to bring in anything different.
Okay. I think talk amongst yourselves for 2 seconds and
uh-oh.
He's getting ready. He has a PowerPoint. I'm going to put him on stage.
You joke. I've got one.
Oh! All right. What say you, Chad, before we give Andrew the floor?
I just want to make sure that, okay, it's working. Good. Well, I guess give Andrew the floor. I do have some thoughts on the paramount coupling of stories and reality. Like the reason I think stories are vital and inescapable in some of the McCarthy work that I read, Cormac McCarthy work, he often brings up this concept of once once people stop talking about a particular person or a family or a people, that they will be erased from the sands of time for all eternity. And I disagree with that. Only because maybe that's kind of the point you're saying. Something like, I have this idea about like this ridiculous concept called the cosmological burrito, where everything is connected and in a way that is deep and even like the paint strokes that you never will maybe have never actually seen, and yet they are in the painting itself. And sometimes I think our stories are like that. They are maybe you've never heard them. Maybe the story you have told yourself or stories you have heard are representations of egoic desperation or something like that, and yet they still continue to be under the rest of the canvas or on the canvas, but somewhere in the mix. So anyways, yeah, that's kind of where I'm thinking about right now.
Awesome. I've seen that Andrew has put up a different screen for me too. This is good. This is like testing what I tried to learn about StreamYard a second ago.
I have no idea how this works, but apparently I should be able to control some. There we go.
Okay, I was gonna say, if you can't, I know I can. So go for it.
No, I think I can. And just preface this: this is not like a long-standing, I don't know, prepared material. It was just on the back of our conversations about story that I felt I was getting lost a little bit yesterday and the day before of trying to make sense of story and how to talk about it and how to frame it, and like especially the depth of the conversation yesterday with the personal stories. So this is my attempt at trying to clarify some of my thoughts on just the complexity of story in this day and age. One of the things that I thought of was just distinguishing between almost like zooming in and out with stories. Where we zoom out, we're thinking about like the grand narratives, worldview, shaping of story, of culture, of everything. And zooming in, we've got the internal stories that we tell ourselves, or that maybe more closely hit home, which is what we were, I think, more talking about yesterday, whether it's personal experience stories or family members, or similar to what Olsen was even talking about a few days ago with the name and character and our identity. And then we were trying to talk about myths and the concept of stories and the implications on truth, and trying to discern truth in the midst of stories, or is truth the myths that have been passed down and the implications that has. So that was just my trying to distinguish there, especially in the midst of a culture that's been inundated with propositional truth, where it's like Western thought's been heavily influenced by it. PVK talks about like modernism and then postmodern and metamodernism, and I'm sure you guys are all familiar with it, but it was just my understanding of just the distinction between propositional truth and stories, where stories is just far more subversive, far more subtle, but far more ambiguous. And then I guess, yeah, like it says there, as somebody wise once said, it depends what you believe, thinking about like what we actually, what we believe, and our propositional truth leading to propositional tyranny. Let's keep going. This is something of, I don't know if anybody saw PVK's videos yet, talking about like orthodoxy and some of the search for authority in the midst of our insecurity or uncertainty. if we're moving from propositional certainty to something of deconstruction, leading to a personal vulnerability, uncertainty, and insecurity, and we start searching for authority. And depending on where we find that authority, like, yeah. Then a wise man once said that it's not the winners that write the stories, but the survivors who write the stories. What stands the test of time? And this was what I kind of came down to, that this is not an advert for what I believe, but more just an attempt to frame the different perspectives that we have of stories and the different nuances in those stories. And I'm not claim to be the expert on Judaism or Christianity or Islam or atheism or even agnosticism, but I was looking at it, how we frame those stories themselves can either have a relational nature, or we can also look at it as specifically the instructions we're given to live. Or I think a lot of the way we approach some of these beliefs is through like an anthropological progressive understanding, where if we look at story and our myths is something that's just been passed down and handed down and built upon, it's a way of somewhat describing it. This may be a bit, I don't know, too complex, probably even for me to explain at this time of day, never mind early in the morning for you guys. But the distinction for me was, if we look at, like, say, the Christian story, is the Bible a set of instructions for us to follow? Or is it the communication of the relational nature of God? Anyway, let me get to this one slide. If PVK describes, like, what is the highest good and how do we get there? If that's our definition of religion or our definition of like a worldview, it becomes the dominant way of us telling a story. It becomes the story that we live in, the story that shapes our understanding of ourselves, our purpose, our way of approaching life. And then I go back to this one. I think that's how we often approach most of these questions, is that we're looking at it that God has created this world, if you're approaching it from, say, the Jewish, Christian, or Islamic, or any religious perspective, where God's created this world and he's given us a set of like instructions to actually live by. That becomes kind of the middle tier there. Or a lot of the conversation at the moment is that these stories that have been handed down through religion are just a product of kind of natural evolution and progressive discussion. And as we've grown, we've developed these things and we've discovered them and we've built upon them. So it's even in telling, say, a Jewish story, they can say it's actually, this is just the history and the story and the myth that's been handed down and built upon. And the same thing with the Christian story. And now the same thing, I think, I wouldn't want to speak for it, but Claire has something of that framework where it's like Islam is the culmination of those stories. If it's instructions to live by, she's saying that this is the fulfillment of that, and that's what we're supposed to live into. I think a lot of the Christian stories that we hear are similar to that, where this is just the passed down truth of what we are supposed to live by, therefore go and live it. The Bible says it, I believe it, that settles it, therefore live it. I think a lot of the Jewish perspective is similar to that, where it's God's revealed the Torah, this is what we're supposed to live in, therefore go and do it. Whereas from my perspective, I think the Judeo-Christian revelation is primarily a God that's creating a story and intervening into a situation and wants to actively participate in it. And as an ongoing participation in that story, he gives us ways to live by. And that's what the Torah is. That's what scripture is. That it's not the scripture is not the first and foremost thing. That it's actually we're invited into a story of participation and relationship. And yes, there are clearly like values of right and wrong and things we're supposed to do and what we're not supposed to do. But there's primarily an invitation into a greater story that dominates it. That it's the relational nature is the preeminent thing rather than the instructions. And if you come back to like that, one of the first few slides, that's kind of allows us to break out of the box of the propositional truth, which is what I think a lot of people are being drawn to in the reimagining and re-enchanting of the world, where we're not invited into a purely legalistic like framework that this is what you have to do, this is how you have to live, and trying to nail down everything with all the certainty of the answers. But actually, there's a God of mystery and wonder and invitation and relationship who's inviting us into a greater story. And that's kind of the zoomed out picture of that. But then the zoomed in picture is how it actually relates to us personally. And I think that's what we were speaking about yesterday, where the stories that we believe about ourselves, whether they true or not, is whether they fit into that bigger picture or not. And I think a lot of the lies is that we believe that we are stuck in, whether it's our addiction or our patterns of brokenness that have been handed down to us from our parents or our community or our situation. And the invitation is to actually believe something better about us and participate in inviting others into that. And that was my attempt at, I don't know, painting a little bit of, or weaving a little bit of our previous chats of the importance of story at this moment, of whether we zoom in for our personal needs or zoom out for the grand narrative story, and how that relates to the various different worldviews that we have. Yeah, so that's my presentation for this time of the day.
Damn,
Very good. Very good.
that was good. You've got some talent there, brother.
So you created that?
I wrote a little bit of something on what we were talking about on the back of writing a poem where I tried to synthesize what I was thinking and saying and threw it into our general favorite thing around here of AI that generated a slide for me. But if I was doing it and actually creating my own, I would spend, I think, a lot more time actually crafting it. It was purely that it gave us an opportunity to actually look at these things and think about the different elements of it. And I feel like I was getting lost in some of our conversations over the last little while and trying to figure out how do we pull on such large threads that I think are really important, and then also getting lost in the midst of the lack of like clarity between them.
I think that's really helpful. The way my brain works is I feel like sometimes I get into such an abstract, flowy, ambiguous cloud structure that I forget that there's a need to sort of like condense and come back to reality. And so oftentimes when we think about this, especially when it comes to like personal stuff, it's really easy to get lost. Again, that's sort of like in that story, in the emotions, in how it's like drawing you, which is beautiful. And it like they should take you on a journey, but sometimes like, again, sort of like stepping back and seeing that bigger perspective is like how the story actually finds its eventual place of meaning. And so I think that that's really helpful to remind people that like yes, there is that zooming in, zooming out that needs to be a part of actually integrating it and having it actually mean something to you, like long term, especially if it's not your story. Like, I don't know, something about what you were talking about, like, kind of reminded me of this idea of like, I think the phrase is like, do we have ideas or do ideas have people? Do people have ideas or do ideas have people? And I think oftentimes we're born into an already structured idea, an already structured like story. And then, like Andrew was saying, like putting ourselves into that story somehow. And so whenever we like meet reality as ourselves, then we're always comparing it to this like story. So is this right or is this wrong in comparison to like the larger, bigger story? But then in the same sense, our story is creating that bigger story over like long term. And so obviously it gets very complex, but I think again, that zooming in, zooming out is very important.
Yeah. One of the things that I'm always reminded of is when I get frustrated with those that are wired abstractly, or just, I say abstractly because I feel like that's only just because it's not a very good it's not a positive word in my vocabulary when I'm describing someone. um I think the gratitude I have for the artist, because without them it would be hard for me to step out of the way that I'm normally wired to see things and find some beauty in the world in different ways, right? And like I'm much more wired like Andrew there with the way that he's structuring his ideas and how he's trying to put it out there, in a, I don't want to say systematic because that may trigger abstract people, but I'm saying the organization of it is very helpful for me. And so it's just nice to see the value that each type bring to the table to help the overall thing. And that's more of a broad thing about what I'm feeling about what you're saying. Not really about what you're saying. I liked what you said and how you presented it too. But I know it's also not for everybody, and I have to be okay with that too.
Andrew, do you feel like making this poem, or which you're also welcome to read I don't know if, did you post like it yesterday or something? Was it a Substack thing? Is that what I saw? I didn't click on that.
I got
If you
it.
wanted to read that, you're welcome to read that too. But I was going to ask, like, did making these things like give you that clarity you were seeking? Like, did this help you understand the topic more? Did it open up new avenues for you, or did it just, yeah, what happened?
I think all of this is, I think, opening up new avenues and clarity on how to communicate these ideas. Like Olsen said, it's like, yes, those are very Western take on storytelling, but that's my background. If I'm going to bring what I have to contribute to the table, it's going to be that. And maybe that's not going to be for everybody, but I think it's similar to the chat we've had recently. It's like, for us all to bring what we bring to the table, we have to allow to be able to bring it. And that's what I've said to Brett when he posted his communication of Calvinism. It's, a lot of people will say, oh, this is, how dare you communicate that? It's like, well, but that's what Brett is diving into, and it's what's alive and real and powerful for him. And that's, yeah, that can't be wrong around here if this is a space where we can actually share our ideas. I don't know, I was listening to one of the interviews recently where it's I always find myself, it's quite easily, I find myself comfortable in a very conservative space, being the one that's pushing like the boundaries. So as opposed to being in a very open space, appearing to be the more conservative element of trying to bring clarity or certainty. So it's like, depending on where you are, it's like my aim is to be as, I don't know, it's like often we'll have a right or left distinction for like conservative versus very open. And I think the beauty is perfectly in the center of knowing to hold on to certain things in the past while pushing as much as we can to the best in the future. And however you take that, it's like I'm aiming as best I can to find that like middle way or third way, but that's not necessarily always well received, because you're always being somewhat contrary in the situation. Because if you're in a space that's dominated by creatives on the left, you're going to be saying like, I see that, I love it, I celebrate that, but there's this. And the same thing on the other side, where it's like, that's what I was trying to say. So I think we've been in a world that's been dominated by an attempt at propositional like tyranny in every area, in every sphere. And I think especially in the like religious like domain, we've tried to nail everything down and find the answer for every question and systematize everything. And those systems have been exposed as inadequate. And basically the way that I summarize it is like the secret things belong to God, but that which has been revealed belongs to us, and it's for us and for our children. And there's some things that have been revealed and there's something that aren't. And there is a place where, hey, let's do the best we can to figure out what we can, enjoy the mystery of the two, and do the best we can at finding the balance between the two of them. And that's my attempt at figuring it out. I don't claim to have all the answers. Like the best people that I've heard is they basically say that I know that at least 20% or 25%, if not more, of my views are wrong. I just don't know which views those are. So the way that I grow and learn is by sharing those. And together we can actually hopefully mutually like be edified and grow towards something greater.
If I'm not mistaken, the propositional tyranny, I don't remember exactly. I know it comes from the Vervaeke's Meaning Crisis series, Awakening from the Meaning Crisis, and I think, yeah, it's kind of getting at kind of what Andrew's talking about, where starting with, I think, Protestantism, and then they made like kind of sola scriptura thing, and then as you trickle down through time, this idea of the written word and what it says and adhering to it as it's written is like this way of shaping cultures, and becomes tyrannical because yeah, I mean, when I kind of think about this, I actually think about Claire's secular Quranism. This idea, like that, to me is a very, if that were an enforced way of law or something, that would be a propositional tyranny. And if you wane outside of the lines of the propositions or the law that is offered, then you'll be penalized for that, whether it's through shunning or other punitive measures. So yeah, that's the idea to me. And I wonder if I hear my daughter.
How do you agree on propositions?
Well, that's I think
Yeah, I think you can. I think you like, yeah. I don't know if there is like an agreement of propositions. I mean, you can, but it's not a felt agreement. It's like a abstracted agreement or whatever.
those are traditions.
Like,
Over
I
time.
think of propositional tyranny as like essentially this belief that like only something that's real, the things that are real are only the things that you can like say out loud, like that you can prove, that you can like put down in a sentence. And I think like, because those are what propositions are. It's like the like little objects that you put together and then it forms a sentence and you say this is a thing. And it's like, I mean, technically, yes, it is a thing. It's an objective thing, but is it real? That's dependent on the context and on the person and on the, it's so much on the like on the meat of it. And so I think of propositional tyranny as like, for me, and how it manifests is the need to prove or explain myself through everything I do in my life. And I think that's, I don't know, I think that's like Luciferian fallen thought. I don't think that's actual living, breathing within communion with one another. I don't think that's like real, I guess.
So then, what? So what would we consider real?
The both andness of that. Like I think like I don't know, the felt compassion of a hug from a friend that I didn't ask for. I think that's real. Like the hug itself was like something, but then the feeling that evoked from it because of the context it was in evoked something different and more and also the same. And so like it's not just like, I don't know if this is making any sense, but it's always like it's the essence of the thing itself. Like if we're just in a vacuum and this pen is all that exists, like, does this mean anything? Is this real? Is like, it's only real in context to like me having it and me using it and its function and its existence in relation to something else. And so things in and of themselves don't like matter. It's always the relation between them. It's the mattering that is created between the context and the thing. And then it's the triad, the combination of the two that actually makes for the reality. And so if we're just using the words without the context, then that third thing, that meaning, I don't think exists yet. Or there is that, but we're pretending that it's not the true meaning. If we take it out of context and saying this is what this means, then we're ignoring the context and the meaning of which the context brings out of that specific object. And that's just, I don't know, that's idolizing, that's idolization or whatever, idolatry, thank you. So
that's when I think of propositional tyranny too, I think of the problem of standardization. Again, it's like this idea that everything can be stamped and approved and verified, and what doesn't fit into the mold or the the jig or whatever gets cast aside. And I mean, there's some good. I mean, some tyranny is good. I mean, otherwise, I mean, you would basically, we aren't living by random, arbitrary strings of words put together. You know, it's there's a meaning and purpose to things, and And I think like there's no way around the tyranny of propositions to some degree, and I think that there ought to be a respect for it. But I mean, I think this is where tradition actually comes from. Traditions are things that are kind of a fluid formation of these adhering to and then breaking away from the tyranny of the propositions that are passed down. So, like communities or bodies of people stumble into tradition, or I guess, like we talk about liturgies. Like the liturgies that we have here on the TLC or with these live streams are things that they're patterns that are repeated over time that we say, oh, I like that pattern. I like that pattern. And then they just kind of become passed down, and they become kind of eventually, let's say, if somebody said, well, can you like write it out for me so I know what to do? Then that can be something like a tradition. Now, if and then if like somebody new comes in and does something that's outside of that tradition, then they might get penalized or whatever, whether it's verbalized or something like that. They're like, oh, dude, you're stepping out of whatever. Then that's the propositional tyranny that gets the tyrannical nature of, well, I mean, that's like cult stuff, I guess. I don't know. I'm rambling, but something like that.
Because I almost feel like this propositional tyranny is in place when like the mind and the body are like disconnected. Like when you can't feel what's happening, you need something that's not feeling to explain it. Or to, in like a lot of times the way that like Claire talks about, like, oh, if people are just immoral, you need laws to have a society that works. And like in that sense, fair enough. Like if no one has integrity and morality, and we want people to not, rape and kill each other, we need a structure that we can point back to say, hey, you didn't do this.
Right.
If people like could feel and could care and could find meaning, the laws would not matter as much as the, every choice in the middle of the human heart, right? Or whatever, like,
yeah.
So, yeah, so that's what I'm thinking of is like, I get that there is definitely a reason for this like structure and this like tyrannical, but I think my issue is that it's like, that's what we're first things, like, because we can't feel, like we are like going to that first, and then we're just doubling down on our inability to feel our own integral structure and our own morality. The more we just use the proposition over and over and over, and we just rely on the proposition, and I don't know, it's a sticky cycle there.
Well, it's when the horizontal becomes disconnected from the vertical.
Correct.
It's when things start to get wacky. So, like, maybe the proposition
That's very
is,
propositional.
well, like I think maybe like the proposition is maybe the things that happens between us. That's the horizontal. But when we forget where it comes from, the vertical, that's when I don't know, something like this.
What's up, Olson?
Or first I just apologize to Andrew. That wasn't didn't mean it as a negative critique. You're
from my favorite football commentator. That's great.
It was the thing that I like, I smiled at as you started, and then as you explained, like it came from you trying to do a poem. Like that was even like that's so so fun, and it completely makes sense to me. Like, you're trying to sort out your thoughts, and so that's a super helpful framework for doing that and stuff. And so yeah, it was just really funny because we're talking about story, and oftentimes when I think of people talking about story, this a lot of my experience may be coming from the hippy dippy Northern California stuff, but right, like story is I feel a very Eastern influence on that, and then a postmodern influence as they're trying to incorporate that to kind of dismantle some of modernism and things like that, or trying to be able to explain things in a different way than modernism. And so it's like, and so we're wrestling with this idea of story again in my mind, loosely associated with more of an Eastern thought. And then you're trying to do a poetry, which would be that way. But then to help you understand as you're writing that, then you go to like PowerPoint and putting it down that way. Like that process was just, that was really cool to see. And so again, it wasn't meant as a critique. And yeah, you did what you do to bring that to the table. Really appreciate it. Appreciate it a lot. Second was I had another good point just about what we were talking about just now recently, and I'm trying to reach it, trying to grasp it, but it fell out of my head.
Propositional tyranny.
Propositional tyranny. Oh, propositional tyranny. I don't know, like again, maybe this is just my weird upbringing. I know a lot of people, I know a lot of places and situations and things that want to say they go just by facts. Certain personalities around say that in the corner, but the truth of the matter, I rarely run into a propositional tyranny, at least that I could identify as a full tyranny. I think there's always some sort of a escape or loophole, kind of as Brett was pointing out, as we were talking about, as Chad was pointing out the vertical and the horizontal, which I agree with is a good analogy. I agree with that, Chad. So it's not a critique of that, but then Brett was like, well, that's propositional of itself, and so he was using the story of our vertical story and our horizontal stories, and propositionally putting it in, and then like, but then to describe it was a proposition. So like I think they're intertwined, right? Like they're we go through our lives, we go through our day to day, and we have these propositional shortcuts in our head. Like if I drop this ball, it's gonna fall, right? Could I make up a story where I drop the ball and the ball sprouts wings and it becomes a snitch from, or Stitch, or whatever the thing is from Harry Potter? Sure, yeah, like that's a thing. We could come up with that story. And so I think there's an intertwining of the propositional and the relational and the story. So yeah, I don't think either one has a tyranny.
Well, I think the idea where Vervaeke was pointing to this was what it does to a what it's done to the culture overall, to people, or entire whatever, an eon of people, or whatever, a whole his theory is something like how it shaped the let's say, and what I'm speaking about is the Western mind.
Mhm.
So, and I think it's also, I think McGilchrist points to some of that too, though I ought not speak of McGilchrist because I've only read like a half a chapter of his book, so gotta be careful there. But
Yeah, isn't that one of your rules?
yes. Yeah, exactly. So I mean, but it's something like that. It's and that's what I think about, like the idea of the problem of standardization, where they, people developed a way to standardize physical items in the world so that they can make life easier for people. Things like sewing machines, whatever. I think it started with firearms and it went to sewing machines and it went down to other things. And those are all really good ideas and ways of helping us to move forward and maybe have better lives. And then what happens is inch by inch, moment by moment, life by life, family by family, a whole kind of like attitude of how to see and manage the world shapes the way that we actually interact with the world and see the world. And we become kind of tyrannical on our expectations of how the world ought to be unfolded. And I think like it shaped how we our epistemological framework. And that to me is what the whole propositional tyranny is all about. It's like how it has corrupted the way that we interact with each other, the way we seek God, the way that we hold values or let values go, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think Jonathan Haidt has that illustration of the elephant and the rider that illustrates, I think, for me, my understanding of the propositional tyranny from a personal perspective, that it might not be the fullness of it, but it's basically the fact that like the rider may think he knows where he's going, but the elephant's going to go where he wants. And there's something of that with our ideas. It's like from a logical perspective, we can say what we think we believe, and we have our propositions on how life works and what we believe, but how we actually live shows what we truly believe or show who we truly are. It gets to like Peterson's, like, it depends what you mean by believe aspect. What I meant with a propositional tyranny is probably more, my background comes from like Christian perspective, so I'm more familiar with like various different streams of Christianity that have largely like propositional and systematic arguments back and forth of trying to figure everything out and nail down the certainty of how life works and how people work and how salvation works and how eternal everything works. And I believe we end up going beyond what we can be certain of, and end up trying to force that on other people, which is like done with the best of intentions over the last 500 years. I would argue thousands of years, because I think you can see the same thing in Jewish thought with the Pharisees trying to figure out the law to the nth degree. I think you can see the same thing in Greek philosophy, where people are trying to figure everything out to the nth degree. I think you can see the same thing from a scientific perspective, where we've been able to prove a lot of things scientifically, but then there also gets an edge where we can't prove everything and we can't understand absolutely everything. We get to a point where we're throwing out an hypothesis on how it works and beyond what we can prove, but we still try and force people to adhere to our system that ties it all together. It's like, it's almost like we've got a lot of facts and a lot of points that do match up, but then we go 1 or 2 points beyond that to try and tie them all together with a system of certainty. And I think that's my best understanding at the propositional tyranny and how it plays out in our life. And I think the rejection of that has drawn people to like, actually, let's rather have stories that like tick a lot of the boxes and invite us into a better way of almost synthesizing some of the facts that we do know. Because we do know, like Megan, you were talking, that hug from a friend is meaningful. That like the certainty of the pen that we have, I know what this is for, I know how it actually works. So like in my day-to-day life, I know certain things to be true. I feel other elements that are far greater that I'm drawn to. I feel like there's a greater purpose in life. I'm drawn to the love or the courage that I've seen through religious institutions or people or saints of the past or stories that draw us into greater pictures. And for me, I think that's why there's a re-enchanting of that, because there's a growing disillusionment with the attempts of everybody nailing down their perfect like framework and system of certainty. Yeah.
So
And
we're
also,
getting close. Go ahead.
no. My strategy wasn't write a poem and figure everything out. It was more just, I don't know, write a poem.
I think since we're getting close towards the end here, I just wanted to say, I guess my last words. The way that I have felt when people have in the corner have used propositional tyranny, seems to be a way that says, back up, let me figure this out for myself. And I can respect that and understand why people get to that place. As they're taking on other people's ideas and or propositions, it seems like it's almost like a conscience that comes up, that swells up in you. And I say you, I'm just general you, that I don't like. I don't like that proposition. And because it's making me feel this way, I feel like you're colonizing me here, emotionally, mentally, and I don't like it. But the proposition may or may not be right or good, right? So it's like, it just seems like sometimes it's the way I have felt about it, is that it seems like it's a defense mechanism to push back and say, just give me some time. I need to process this. And I think that's fair. But using the word tyranny reminds me of the way that Nazi has been used. It's kind of like certain words get used for their emotional gravitas, and it usually has a point and a purpose, and that's its own level of propositional tyranny. So that's how I see that. But I do appreciate everything you said, Andrew, because I like the systematic aspect of it, of course. We have the similar mindsets as far as the way we see things and how we have to lay them out. And I also appreciate all the other people on the screen that are very artistic and are wanting to talk about the layers of the art. I love it.
Well, we love that you love it, Brett. Olson, did you have something? I feel like I heard you unmute. Do you have something you wanted to add before we finish up?
Oh, sure. I guess this could be final thoughts. Yeah. The story that came to mind just now is they were is the idea was the Jesus feeding of the 5,000, and because I feel like that kind of, it's a story that represents my interweaving of story and propositional tyranny. Although I don't think, like I said, it's not tyranny, but the propositional, right? The idea of narrative and propositional. And right, Jesus feeds these five, like there's people, and to tell the narrative, they use a specific number of people sitting around. And now there's debate like, oh, they're children and whatever, things like that. So but still there was a specific number used, and then there was a specific number of loaves and fishes that were used, and then there was the miracle, which part of a miracle is it can't be explained, which is good. But then to help solidify the miracle, it uses a very specific number of basketfuls of leftovers that were then obtained. And so it's again, it just shows that interweaving between, like, this is a physical fact, this is the miracle, here's a physical fact that substantiates that miracle. We're not explaining the miracle, we're just saying it did happen, right? So I think you see that, you know, kind of interplay sometimes with faith and modern medicine. Modern medicine's doing something. We're able to get images of like a cancer that's causing somebody to be sick, and beforehand we didn't have those understandings of imaging and cancer and stuff, but now we do. But
Right.
still, if somebody comes and lays hands on them and prays for them, and that cancer is taken away, right, and it wasn't because of the medicine, right, there's still that miracle, but then that propositional modern medical science is then used to scan their body again and confirm, hey, yes, that cancer is gone, it is away. And so I think in our lives there's both. I think there's room for both. I don't know.
Yeah, as like a science background woman myself, I feel like oftentimes people like to distinguish science from like magic and religion, and like I just feel like life is a constant revealing of itself. Science and these things that we're figuring out were and always have been there. We're just uncovering them. We're discovering them. We're not making them up and putting them together and saying, "Oh, look, we created this." It was already there, created. And so I think it is helpful to realize that this stuff has always been a potential. Like I love, I think Chad said this a while back when he was talking about the epistemology of things and how like as soon as the someone broke 4 minutes in that mile, the idea of being able to break 4 minutes in a mile became a thing. But that was never like something that a human invented. It was something that was a potential that we were uncovering. And then as soon as it was uncovered, all of these humans started breaking 4 minutes in their mile. And so I think just realizing that, yes, it is a like using a proposition to unlock a deeper meaning. Like, I'm not saying, I hope I wasn't coming across as though propositions are bad things. It's just propositions in and of themselves are fallen and missing the point. They're sinning. They're like not, they don't mean anything unless they're like towards or for or within something. And so I think it's just, yeah, I just wanted to make that distinction. So yeah, and then Andrew, I saw that you posted something else in here. Would you like me to share that for the class?
I don't know how well it will display, but we can try.
All right, we'll try it.
Might be a bit small. It's okay. I'll read it. So this is what started the nonsense. Stories that divine us. Once upon a time, there was hope and conviction. Once upon a time, there was peace and prosperity. Once upon a time, there was love and purpose, or was there? Once upon a time, there is chaos and conflict. Once upon a time, there is war and famine. Once upon a time, there is death and disease. Or is this it? Once upon a time, there will be unity and diversity. Once upon a time, there will be truth and grace. Once upon a time, there will be generosity and responsibility. Or is that a dream? Stories shape us, mold us, define and divine us. Stories we're told, stories we've lived, stories that lied. What is a story? What is your story? What is my story? What is the story? Once upon a time, there was emptiness and isolation. Once upon a time, there was corruption and dislocation. Once upon a time, there was embodiment and restoration. Once upon a time, there will be.
Very nice, very nice.
And they all lived happily ever after.
It's a better ending.
All right, Chad, you got anything to finish this off as to get to Chris?
All I was going to say was the introduction of the phrase propositional tyranny unfolded a propositional tyranny upon this story stream. And with that, I will pass. Goodbye.
Thank you guys.
Thanks,
Appreciate
Megan.
it. Have a good one.